And what I'd like to do in today's session, where we're going to focus on MYOB Advanced, I am going to show you how you can create a snapshot of your data that's kept inside MYOB Advanced. Let's say, for example, you might want to take a backup just before you run a month end, or you're going to do something in the system that you want to make sure that you can quickly and easily restore back to a known state. This is where the snapshots can be very, very helpful. What you might also want to do is you might want to grab a copy of that data just so you can say, look, I've got a copy of the data and it's held off-site. So of course, with MYOB Advanced, it is all maintained for you by MYOB. So they're doing those backups and making sure that the disaster recovery is all in place. So you can always rely on MYOB to have that process done. But this is just for you to be able to go and say, all right, I'm going to grab a snapshot, I'm going to grab a backup and take that with me. So in order to do that, what do? Well, we simply go here into System, then we go across here into Management, and then we'll dive down here under Manage Companies. Now that's going to show you a list of all of the companies that you've got available. So you can do a look up there and you can see I've got a number of different company databases. So pick the company that you want, and then you go in here and you say create a snapshot. So now it's just warning you, make sure everybody is out of the system before you do that, because you want to make sure you don't end up with any potential chance of data corruption in your snapshot. So we then say okay. So I'm going to ask you for a description. So I'm going to call this my backup snapshot. Now it's automatically stamping it with the date and time. There's a couple of different things to be aware of here with your export mode. This is where you can specify what components of the database do you actually want to pull out into your snapshot backup. So you can see there's all kinds of different options. You can get a full backup that excludes the attachments and the wiki, a full backup that excludes attachments, just your settings and business accounts without attachments, settings and business accounts, all kinds of different things which can be handy if you are going to use this snapshot to create a new company. But anyway, I'm just doing this for a backup, so I'm going to say full. Then I also want to say I want to prepare this backup for export. What that's going to do, it's going to compress it and create one single file for me that I can then grab and download onto my local PC or whatever device I happen to be using. Now then there's my export format. Binary is the standard format that was always part of MYOB Advanced. The XML format's a newer format. I like to use binary because 9 times out of 10, I'm just bringing that data straight back into an MYOB Advanced environment. So that's the easiest way of doing it. XML is great though if you want to have those files because what you can then do, for example, if you're a developer or an OEM or an ISV or somebody like that, you're doing development work with MYOB Advanced and you want to be able to take all your data out and you want to run it through comparison tools, you want to store your information in a source code repository in something like a GitHub or something like that. XML is ideally suited for that kind of usage. Now you won't see too much of a difference between the two. For your average user though, binary is the format that you want to select. So then I go ahead and I'll say okay, and what you'll see will happen now is my snapshot is now executing. You're going to see that will pop up with a new line in my grid here, and it won't have the ready for export ticked. But a couple of seconds or maybe a minute or two later, depending on the size of your data, that will come up with a tick box in the ready for export and the little progress indicator up here, instead of it being either the spinning globe or the spinning wheel rather, or the little X, the red X, that will be a green tick indicating that the process has completed. So what we'll do, we'll give that a couple of seconds to finish off, and then we're going to come back and take a look at that. So you can now see our snapshot has popped into the grid, but you'll see the ready for export is still not ticked. So the process has got one more step to do. Now, by the way, if you do go ahead and you create your snapshot and you forget to tick the prepare for export, don't worry, because you can select a snapshot that has not been prepared for export, and you can run that prepare for export step as a second process. So create your snapshot, then prepare it for export. I like to tick that box, and that way you end up with everything all in the one set. Now, important point to note here as well, I don't recommend, and neither do MYOB for that matter, that you end up with too many snapshots in here. You should probably only have a maximum of about 5 snapshots that you keep on file. Remember, you can always store those out of your MYOB Advanced environment, and you can bring those snapshots back in. You can import those snapshots anytime that you want. So a good practice to have, take those snapshots and put them in a directory or somewhere secure, somewhere safe, and then you can always bring them back into the system. All right, very important point to note. So again, that's going to finish off, so we'll give that a couple more seconds. Okay, so that's now completed. You can now see we've got our ready for export. So when I would now want to take that and export it out, I simply select that snapshot that I've got there, and I'll go in here and I'll say export snapshot. What it's then going to do is it's going to say, okay, where do you want to put it? Just again, a reminder that this data is going to be out of MYOB's control. So you're just going to acknowledge that, and then it comes in and says, okay, where do you want to put that? So I'm going to put it into my snapshots folder on my local hard drive, and you'll see it's a zip archive format. So I'll just say save. And there it is. There is my zip file has now been created. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to say open. And what the system's now done is you'll see it has unpacked that zip file for me. And you can now see there is all of the files that have come out of your MYOB Advanced system. Pretty much every single one of the databases or the database tables that make up MYOB Advanced. So, for example, if you want to look at one of these files, let's just take a look at the account.adb file. So I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to say open with, and I'm just going to open it with text edit, because that's a nice easy way to see these files. And you'll see there is the basic structure of the database, but then all of the data that's sitting underneath that is actually encrypted for you. So the big difference, of course, with an XML version of the file is that all of that data is completely readable by a human being. So that is, again, one of those differences. So for example, why don't we go ahead and we'll do that right now. I'm going to go... I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create another snapshot. So we'll go in here and say create a snapshot, exactly the same process, except this time I'll call this an XML data backup. And I'll say prepare for export, and this time I'm going to put it into an XML format. So I'll say okay, let's let that run. So now we've got our XML data backup is completed. You can see it's ready for export. So I'm going to export my snapshot. Just click on OK there again. It's going to ask me where do you want to put that data file. Put it in the same location. So I'll say save. Give that a couple more seconds for it to download. So that download's complete. What I'll do is I will now take a look at that file. There it is. And there's my zip file. Double click on it. Now it's going to open that up for me. And there it is. Now if you look, you'll see exactly the same file names, but they just have an XML extension. So now when I go in here, I can say open those files. Again, I'll choose text edit. There's my file now. Same structure, but now all of the records that are in the data file as well are visible and readable by a human being, or even somebody like me. So there you go. That's the difference between those two processes. So now the next process I want to show you is getting the data out and really having a more granular level of control on the system. So what you can do is, if you go here into system, you'll see we actually have our integration engine. And one of the options that we've got here, we've got the ability to export or import data, and we've got the ability to export data. So the process here, when you are creating an export scenario, you need to go in and you basically say in the system, where do you want to get the data from? So if I go and I'm going to call up one of our existing export scenarios, rather than going through and building a whole one from scratch, I'm going to show you an export scenario that already exists. So let's say, for example, I want to export all of my accounts receivable, invoices, and memos. Let's say I want to push them off into another system for the sake of the exercise. I'm going to call that one up. And you'll see the first question it asks, or the first piece of information that you define, is which screen name in MYOB Advanced is this reading from? So effectively, what this is doing is it's giving you the ability to go into any screen that you want and take every single piece of data from the underlying databases using that screen. And you can put parameters in there that say, I only want to get all invoices that have been raised in the last day or the last month or the last week or whatever the case may be. And that's why when you get your screen name defined here, the system gives you the option to go in here and say, I want to view the screen. And what it then does is it will actually show you the underlying screen, and you can see all of the fields that are there in that screen. And of course, you're able to go in here into customization as well, and you can choose inspect element. And if you ever want to be sure or understand whereabouts in the underlying data does that information come from, you can use the mouse pointer, which has now become a question mark. You can go to the particular field. So let's say, for example, I'm looking at my customer code field here, and I'm thinking, wonder what that is, where does that data come from? I can now click on that field, and you'll see it shows me the control type, what the data class is, and remember in MYOB Advanced, the data class is basically the underlying table. All right, so this is the AR invoice. The data field in that data class is the customer ID, and then what you can do, you can see here under your actions, you can view the ASP source code for this screen. You can view the business logic source code, and you can go in and you can view the data class source code. You're also able to go in here and choose customize, and then it gives you the ability to go in and create a new customization project where you want to start adapting and modifying this particular screen. But I'm not going to go and show you that. That's out of the scope of this session. But there it is. That's how you have another mechanism for getting that data out of the system. So I've got that export scenario, and then I can go in here and I can process that export scenario. So I go up here into export by scenario, and I find the one that I've got, which is exporting my invoices and memos. So I'll select that, and you can see I've got two choices. All right, I can prepare the data, so I can say prepare. What it's now doing is it's running that underlying export scenario, and it's creating the data set in the format that I've specified. Now, depending on the amount of data you've got in the system, any parameters that you've put on it, how long it's going to take, or that will determine how long it's going to take for this process to run. We'll give that a few more seconds, and then you'll see this table will get populated. Now, just a side note, while that's running, you also have the ability to go here into the History tab, and each time you go and run this export, you're going to get the details of that export here. So you're going to be able to see each time that you've run that. And because this is creating a file, the other thing that it's going to do when I tell the system that I want to export it, you'll see up here in MYOB Advanced, we have this ability to, to see the files that are attached. When I run that export, it's going to create a new version of the export file here, and I can click in here and view that file. So we'll give that a couple more seconds to run. So our preparation's now completed. You can see it's pulled out all of the transactions out of my database, and then I simply go in here and I'll say export, and now it's running my export process. And as it goes through and it runs through each of those transactions, as each transaction gets exported out, you can see we've got 7,263 of them. As each one of those gets pumped out, it gets this process tick pushed against it. So that's now completed. You see our operations completed. And if I go here to history, you'll now see that I did my preparation and I did my process. And then if I go up here and look at my files, you'll see here is the file itself. I can click here on edit and then call up the document management functionality in MYOB Advanced. And you'll see each time I've created that file, there will be a version ID here, and I'm able to select each different one of those versions. All right, so I can go, I've got that version there, and then I can get the latest version. And what does it now do? It now downloads that file for me in the format that I've specified. Now, with this particular file, I specified that I want it to be created as an XML file. So that's why you're seeing that it's going to save that as XML. But when I define my export by scenario, this is where I have the ability to specify what kind of file am I going to have it created as. And the way that we do that is we use these data providers. Let's go back, look at our export scenario again, and you'll see I'm using this data provider which has been created called Invoices and Memos. So if I look at this data provider option here and I call up that particular file, go to our next screen, Invoices and Memos. It's going to be here in a second. We've got quite a few. There it is, Invoices and Memos. And you'll see our provider type is the Excel provider. And I can see this is what the file is going to look like. There's the schema. There's all of the files, all the fields in the file. And if I go back here to my first screen, you'll see these are all the different provider types that I can choose from. CSV files, Excel files, SQL Server files, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole range of those different files that are available. Plus, utilizing the MYOB Advanced framework, you can even write your own data provider files. So if you're trying to export to a specific external system, if one of these existing file formats doesn't work for you, you can programmatically create your own. So that's a couple of the different ways that you can get the data out of MYOB Advanced. Again, remember, if you're watching this and you're more familiar with Acumatica, the same process works with both, because remember, both MYOB Advanced and Acumatica are built off the same fundamental code base.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn new smart ways to grow your business. You can also check out our blog and follow us on Twitter to learn more and stay up to date. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.